I laugh every time. Hello! Welcome to Nerdist Book Club. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch the last Wednesday of every month. This one snuck up on me, not gonna lie. February is a deceptive month. I'm Rachel Heine, and joining me, as always, are my friends and co-hosts, Hector Navarro and Maude Garrett. Hi!
Yes, it's Happy Book Day.
Yes,
and happy month of love. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Mwah, mwah.
Yeah. No, it was really nice to read kind of a romance this book. But welcome to everyone at home. Thank you for joining us. Say hello in the chat. If you're new to Nerdist Book Club, please introduce yourself in the chat and let us know some of your favorite books. Do you have genres you like to read? Did you just get back into reading? This is exactly what it sounds like. Every month we get together and talk about the book that we've read so far. So this month we read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So I want to hear from everyone in the chat too. Have you read this before? Is this your first time? Did you listen to it, read it? Let us know your thoughts. Thank you, Hector. I love the cover.
It's pretty, isn't it?
The cover art, and it's very evocative of the of the book and the writing in it.
Gaming Shepherd says never read it. Well, it's going to be a weird hour for you, my man. That's going to be confusing because we are going full into spoilers here.
But thanks for joining us. Hopefully it'll be fun. Maybe it'll convince you to read it, or you don't have to now.
First time reader.
Nice.
Love to read a book where the prose is so luxurious that it feels like being wrapped in the plushiest blanket. I like that.
I agree. Ebook, cool. I actually didn't listen this time. I have been an audiobook convert for a few years after Maude extolled the virtues, and it really works well with how I read and my brain, how it likes to do many things at once. But this one I read, it was the audiobook. I thought it just was a little cold in the beginning, and I think because the book is in third person, that I wanted that like intimacy of actually reading it. What about you, Hector? Did you audiobook this time?
I did physical book. I don't know. Maybe I coming off of our audiobook of Sandman last month, which I adored. But maybe I subconsciously was like, I'm not going to do this as an audiobook because I know it's not a full cast. I know it doesn't, it's not a full production thing. So I think I just decided to order the physical copy. And I asked in the Geek Bomb community's Discord what would be a great movie soundtrack to listen to. And I got a bunch of great recommendations. And I ended up sticking with the Tim Burton directed Dumbo movie.
Yes.
Which first of all, it's Tim Burton. It's Danny Elfman doing the score. It's perfect, but it's literally about a circus. I tried Big Fish thinking that it was it's another Tim Burton film, thinking that it was going to kind of match the vibe and the romance of it. And it kind of worked, but Big Fish is kind of more like an emotional drama at times. And the Dumbo score, it being about a circus, like
and
worked
fantastical
throughout. Yeah, really fantastical.
And
so
that gothy Tim Burton vibes, I imagine. That's great. I'm going to listen to it afterwards.
I'd recommend that. Yeah. I still haven't seen the Dumbo movie, so it made me want to watch it.
I haven't either. I have not either. I don't know. The trailer made me cry. Like, I just can't handle.
Oh, yeah. No, it wounded me, that movie.
Same with even with The Lion King. I started crying as soon as the little cubs show up in the most recent live action, whatever you want to call it. Just immediately started crying. Like, people next to me afterwards were like, are you okay? I was like, no, the kitties. The kitties were in danger.
Having seen the movie Encanto sitting in the row in front of you two, like, you guys are gonna
best way to watch a movie.
Best way.
That's what 5D is.
Yep.
It's like you're watching the movie.
Yep.
Like
it's emotional. And then behind me, my friends are like, it was great. It was great.
But I'm being demonstrated how to feel and with emotion the whole way. And I actually, Rachel, watching movies next to you is a better experience.
Yeah.
I can't. I try so hard not to react. loudly, but I do. I
Yeah.
often do. And Maude, do you listen to it this time?
I absolutely listened to the book. It's narrated by Jim Dale. Now, those that don't know Jim Dale, he's made a big name for himself because he's narrated all of the Harry Potter books, along with Stephen Fry, who's also done it. But I have listened to the Harry Potter books many times. So I have an association with Jim Dale's vernacular cadence to Harry Potter. It was very hard to detach from that for me personally. His voice just, and I wanted it to make it seem more mystical, and it did a little bit. It did capture sort of like that fantastical essence of the Harry Potter world in this facet, but I also think it deterred it a little bit for me as well, because it was harder to separate. So pros and cons for it. I'm definitely glad that I got through it. I think it would have been nice, Hector, actually, to have some of that like carnival music kind of like every time you're in a moment or in one of the tents, because the tents are so descriptive and lush and like, evocative, that I kind of wish I had a little bit more audio assistance with the discovery of the different places within the night circus.
I haven't listened to the audiobook yet. I'm sure Jim Dale does a phenomenal job. But again, just like my producer brain, the first thing I thought of when reading this, thinking about the audiobook, is like, look, if you're going to give me a story that have two people falling in love, I feel like, wouldn't it make sense to have an audiobook that is two people playing those characters so you can really get that kind of, different perspective? Because correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't Gone Girl multiple?
Yes.
Right?
And
most thrillers are.
Yes.
Many of the books I read, I have to, maybe I'll go through it in the after show because I have to pull my list, but I've listened to like 20 books this year because I have insomnia. And
this year, Rachel, it's like it's about to be March. What?
I
this
think
year,
I'm on
2
like
months?
24, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, so I don't
like 11 or
sleep.
12.
Yeah,
and I sleep.
It's what I like to do in my free time, and I sleep a few hours. But all of the titles, because they're all thrillers, are like The Forgotten Family, The Girl Across. It's just I told Lee about it. But so many of those have kind of the dual narrator perspective where you don't know which narrator to trust, and there's usually two different ones, and that's my favorite like style of audiobook. Is not necessarily the fully produced, because I either get distracted by the other sounds, or I ignore, like they're just not, I don't even register them. Depends on how my brain is feeling in any given moment. So but I thought that was really funny.
Yes,
all the titles.
Yes, Susan has a great comment here. Susan Bentley in the Facebook chat says, if they are a good performer, you believe they are different people. I totally agree. I'm just again, my producer brain is like, just as a backup, just as a safety net, if it's within the budget, why not, instead of putting all of that kind of performance pressure on one person to really sell that, bring in the added element of, okay, it's you and one other person. You both,
Money.
you just really,
That's why.
Yeah, I know.
But also,
but
I think perspective, because it is in third person.
Right. Yeah.
So I think there's also something, I think most times when there is, when there are more than one. Yeah. And second, which I really want to talk about. But I think that's part of it too, is if it were actually from each of their perspectives, when you switched back, that would make more sense than one narrator doing, particular voices for the characters. Did he do a variation of character voices? I didn't get that
a little bit, but when you again read 7 books and however many, like 100 hours of these characters, like he would put on a woman's voice, and I'm like, it's a little Hermione. Oh, this sounds like
it's just too close in your head.
So was it Harry and Hermione, or was it Ron and Hermione? Who was kind of falling in love in this, Maude? Who would you say?
Harry.
Yeah. Marco. Yeah.
That's so
Celia was not a Hermione. He has a kind of an array, and he's used them for different characters. So it's
Yeah.
not, you can't completely separate it.
For
I just
sure.
want to shout out to Lost the Numbers in the chat there, Lee, who's getting into reading and on the third book, Six of Crows, because we're talking about an ensemble cast. Six of Crows, obviously there are 6 key characters. We covered it for Geek One. So good if you need a good
So
duology.
good.
But the audiobook
It's-
has 6 separate voice actors because they have their own chapters each. And that, if you need a good audiobook, one of the better ones out there.
Very cool.
It was his Ron voice, says Ian Powell. Ron voice.
You're a magician.
Because he gets a bit. I've been at the circus for a long time, and this is what I want. Yeah, you're right.
Oh yeah.
You're a
That would
magician,
distract
Marco.
me.
I'm a what? You're capable of magic, Marco. I'm a what?
Voices are
Yeah.
too good.
I've read 4 books so far this year. That's better than
That's
I thought it
great.
would be, but I feel like that's
That's really good.
But I'm also
'cause, like,
behind
yeah.
on a bunch of TV.
Gotcha,
So
gotcha.
I go through
Wow.
I go through phases, and right now
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely in a deep. I'm gonna run out of recently published thrillers that sound appealing to me at some point, and then I'll probably go back into a different genre again. But
If you need any fantasy,
I know. Well, I'm
Long
excited. We have a poll. We have a poll
Thirsty
going
Days.
on right now. I think we know where it's
What?
going to land, but
Mhm.
for our book next month. But I'm really excited because all 3 of Maude's picks. So this month, Maude picked 3 books for us to choose from, and
all fantasy.
you can go vote. But it's great because I've had all 3 on my list forever because of you, Maude, and other recommendations after you, of course. So whatever wins, I'm excited. But
Yeah,
why don't
we're
we
the same.
dive
It's a win-win-win
more
situation.
deeply? Yeah, it's a win-win-win. Maude, do you want to kind of dive into the Night Circus synopsis before we get into the nitty-gritty?
I sure do. I want to do it as Jim Dale almost in a way, but the circus arrives without warning. No announcements precede it. It is simply there when yesterday it was not. Within the black and white striped canvas tents is an utterly unique experience full of breathtaking amazements. It is called Le Cirque des Rêves, and it is the Rêves? Nah. And it is
idea.
only open at night. But behind the scenes, a fierce competition is underway, a duel between 2 young magicians, Celia and Marco, who have been trained since childhood expressly for this purpose by their mercurial instructors. Unbeknownst to them, this is a game in which only one can be left standing, and the circus is but the stage for a remarkable battle of imagination and will. Despite themselves, however, Celia and Marco tumble headfirst into love, a deep, magical love that makes the lights flicker and the room grow warm whenever they so much as brush hands. Oh, love romance. True or not, the game must play out, and the fates of everyone involved, from the cast of extraordinary circus performers to the patrons, hang in the balance, suspended as precariously as the daring acrobats overhead.
Well done. Well
That
done.
was great.
Good show.
So before we dive into some of the discussion questions and things that we thought about it, give us, and in the chat, please chime in too. What's your rating overall? Did you enjoy it? And then we'll dive into specifics. Hector, you go first.
Oh boy, I tell you what, so many people love this book. So many people in the chat are like, it's my favorite book of all time. So I kind of had high expectations going into this. It was sort of hyped up for me, and I was very excited. And I also I love stories. I love getting to feel like getting to feel like there's chemistry between 2 fictional characters, and that I believe that they're actually in love with one another. And so I was so excited to get into it. And I had a real tough time connecting to it overall. And I think 2 things were happening for me. I think the first thing was that, and I'll say this too, I think that the book is beautifully written. I think that nothing of the writing itself is what kind of didn't quite grab me. I think it was honestly the subject matter itself and sort of what the story was doing. But for the first part, the subject matter, I felt like this book is really geared towards folks who love the circus aesthetic, the sort of turn of the century, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s vibe. And that if you're not already keyed into that, I don't think that this book is necessarily like, I wasn't putting this down being like, I need to create a costume for myself for cons. Like I wasn't getting sucked in as an outsider looking in, but it did feel like I'm an outsider. And I'm like, oh, this is tailor made for folks who are already like into that vibe. And so I think the first thing that happened for me is, along with that, I was also sort of like asking questions about the logic of the world and the rules of the magic. And that's tricky to do because it's magic. It's just supposed to be, you know, it's like,
and the style of
yeah,
like magic system. There's like hard
yes,
and soft, you know, where
right. And
there's specific rules or it's a little more general.
And I got a lot of those, I guess, answers, because I ultimately, when it comes to magic stuff in fictional stories, for me, I don't necessarily need everything explicitly explained, explicitly laid out, but I do appreciate when fictional stories will be like, look, this thing has magic, but it's not an end all be all solution for the problems. Like, there'll be give and take. There will be sacrifices that have to be made, and so on and so forth. So like by the end of the story, there was that. You know, I did feel like, okay, these characters made this choice and they were able to break the pact, but not without a cost. So, okay, I get that. But I think I was still trying to wrap my mind around like the bigger picture. I'm like, who are these characters? Father figures. What's their deal? What's the sort of bigger picture of like the whole duel and the whole contest? And again, we got some of those answers, but I couldn't quite sink my teeth into the lore. The second thing for me, which if I put that stuff aside, I'm like, okay, who cares? At the end of the day, this is a love story between two characters. Do I buy it? And I had a tough time connecting with that too. I wanted more about Marco. I wanted more from Celia. I felt like I couldn't quite believe that these two, it felt a little bit too much like, because I knew that these were the two characters and they were fated to be together, that as soon as that started, that it was just sort of like they saw each other. That's it. It was done. And I was like, okay, again, this is the magical, fantastical world that we're living in. But I feel like I just wished that I could have connected to either Marco or Celia and had them feel a little bit more real for me, so that I could grab onto that and go, no matter what, Celia loves Marco, and here's why. And it's a great romance. Or no matter what, Marco is absolutely just enamored with Celia, and here's why. So I can latch onto that. So I didn't quite feel the love. I wanted more of that. So I gave it my rating on Goodreads, and Maude chimed in, and she was like, "Whoa, 2 stars!"
That's why you're
that's
that
how
reaction, Maude.
She follows me on Goodreads, yeah, and that's not a reflection. That's just for myself and my own. Yeah, it's again, it's just whenever I do my ratings for books, even for like movies on Letterboxd, we've talked about this a million times. It's not my review of what I think the book is compared to every other book in the world. It's an own personal reference for me, so that years from now, if I forget that I read The Night Circus, I can look at that and go, 2 stars. Okay, that means that it was good, but not for me. 3 stars means I enjoyed it. 4 stars means I really enjoyed it. 5 is I loved it. So that's not it's not a reflection on I think I give the same rating to Sandman, Volume 1 or the 3. And I'm like, that Neil Gaiman's Sandman is fantastic. Not for me. So that's my overall take on the book. Now I got that out of the way. Oh God. Maude, what's yours?
I like the points that you make about wanting to connect to these characters, the lore being a little bit dispersed, if I may, because it's like they would introduce something, the competition. Why? Because the circus gets erected. Why? It's just there. And you kind of just have to suspend sort of like a depth of belief and just go with what's being shown to you. So I understand your point with that. I gave it 3.75 out of 5. But because Goodreads is whole numbers, it's like, do I round up or do I acknowledge that it didn't get me at a 4? So that's been a bit tricky for me. The winning points for it was, I love the genre. I love romance. I love the decadence of it. I love the descriptions. I love the prose and the language and being transported with just beautiful words. I think that Madeline Miller for Circe did a very, very good job of that as well. I preferred the subject matter and maybe the narrator. I don't know, but I preferred that. but I really liked sort of like the essence that it provided. I felt that the reason why my score was hurt a little bit was the time jumps, especially listening to an audiobook where you cannot see and latch onto the numbers. They say it and then it's gone. And that was a little bit difficult for me because there is a lot going on. There is a plethora of characters here that I'm trying to learn about. Characters seem to grow up really quickly, but not in appearance, only in sort of like the time that they've been in the circus. And I think that there were too many pieces to then add the time jump element as well. I feel like they've put us into the mirrored room when I just wanted to walk through the labyrinth in a way, like I wanted to have like a more linear story than push back and bouncing in the back and forth. And I think that the time jumps really hurt that beautiful flow because the language is that flow. And I think that the staccato of the timeline didn't actually aid or assist the beautiful flow of the words that were on the page.
Just a quick note on that. I will say, Maude, that I think I agree with you about that too. I was actually able to flip back and forth, and I did quite often. I was like, okay, we're in 1902 now. We're in 1894. Like I'm cross-referencing and checking the dates, but I think it almost felt like, and I know somebody in the chat mentioned this earlier, that Erin Morgenstern, who wrote The Night Circus, really did kind of approach it like a showrunner for like a show or the director for a movie. And I feel like if this were to be adapted into a show or movie, that the time jumps would work beautifully, really effective. But in the book with that flow, it may have been a bit jarring, especially with the audiobook. So to your point, I agree with you, but I do want to say it almost felt like Erin Morgenstern was almost like beating them to the punch in a way and being like, I'm going to show run my own book and I'm going to, add in this really cool time movement element that can work thematically. But I think, if this were adapted into live action, that would be something that should absolutely remain and it would enhance the live action, but it may have not necessarily enhanced the reading. Rachel.
The chat is split with that as well. Some of them not minding the time jumps and it not impeding them at all. And other people saying that it was a bit of a jumbled mess. So it's quite interesting to see how that's split. In opinion.
Thank you, Jimmy, for that. I will be doing that. I'll do the time warp after we wrap. Miss Necromancer, you are not alone. I don't mind. I actually really like time jumps. I was confused the first, third of this, although, hey, maybe it's something, I don't know. And then someone else, I think True Scorn, asked about my aphantasia because the book is so descriptive. But this is actually, when I was younger, especially, like, this is the kind of writing that really does something to me. Obviously, it's beautiful and evocative, but I need to like noodle more on why this versus a different kind of overly descriptive language. Maybe it's that there's a lot more emotion associated with it. So it's a mood as well as kind of a setting. But I realized I was going through and trying to work out like, okay, how does Bailey work in? And then, and then realized kind of like a third through, I was looking at the dates and I was like, oh, and I went back and sort of confirmed, and then that made sense. And it actually overall really worked for me because I think that's part of the journey of reading it, and it did make sense in the end. But also because of all of these really, I would give it a 4 out of 5 just to start. I think all of the themes really resonate with me, as well as obviously any kind of like gothic vibe is my shit. So it would be hard not to, but the writing was so beautiful. But really all of these kind of themes about chosen family and isolation and nature versus nurture and these kind of systems of power, which is really these two powerful magicians just not caring or even considering the impact that their little game is having on real lives, because they have no real empathy for these people, and they're so removed from it and above it almost that seeing Marco and Celia in different ways, how they were raised and how that kind of played into their magic style and what they're kind of internally fighting against. But really the whole thing is about community and chosen family and sort of not trying to control everything that you can. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I did have moments, but I think Bailey being thread throughout the story actually, and once you finished it, really worked for me because they're telling the story of someone who isn't chosen, but is in a similar place, feeling like they have no decision to make for themselves. It's like, you know, two alternate directions, neither of which super appeals to him either way. And him kind of finding that place and seeing the magic there, even though he's not special according to, you know, Prospero.
Lovingly disagree with you every time a Bailey chapter came up, because it was shrouded in this sort of like mystery where he didn't super have a point for a lot of this, and it was, as Game Wizard's saying, it was his whole purpose ended up being a plot device rather than an actual integral part of the ending of the story. I think for me, maybe Hector, this is kind of what you're talking about as well, couldn't connect with this moment in the book, and so he became such an obvious secondary character that had a lot of time on him, that I, like Miss Penguin was saying earlier, I just felt like I wanted to stick to the main characters and not so much everyone else.
I think it's interesting because I didn't dislike the Bailey sections. I liked them, especially once we got to a part where Erin
Poppy is
Morgenstern
in there.
I can't remember, but it's less about Poppy, but it was more about how Bailey felt about the thing, and this kind of like Luke Skywalker looking at the twin sons, wanting to get the hell out of his house, feeling that I felt like Erin Morgenstern was using Bailey as a way to put all of us into the story, as a way to talk about, as a way to talk about like following your dreams kind of a thing. And ultimately, because of the way that the story was going, I didn't know if it was going to be like a happy sort of romance book or one of these books that like tries to demolish you and it's like everyone dies. Like I didn't know which way it was going to end.
Yeah.
So reading the Bailey stuff, I'm like, either Bailey's going to be like, he's going to take over, or he's going to join, or he's going to be the next Marco or something horrifically tragic's going to happen to Bailey, like it did when that character got hit with a car in the middle of the book, and they went to a funeral, and
the twin
hit with a train, the twin, one of the twins. Yeah. And when that happened, I went, Tara, the one of the twins was killed. I thought maybe Bailey's gonna die. Maybe this will end in a way where it's like, and that's why there's no more night circus today. That's why, like, the records of this thing, you know, like they were going to try to, that Erin Morgenstern was going to try to inject this whole world into our real world and go, all of the records were just like how, I don't know if people know this, but the How to Train Your Dragon movies are based off of kids' books, How to Train Your Dragon. And the first line of the first book. Yeah, and they used, yes, we knew that, Rachel, but apparently I haven't read them yet, but the first line of the first book is once there were dragons, as it's all past tense. And apparently the movies, when they started, the makers of the films, they were like, we're going to try to get to that point, and it might be kind of sad. But by the end of the third movie, they sort of, that's why it's called The Hidden World. They hide the dragons all the way, as opposed to saying they were all wiped out, because they wanted to get to that point where it's like, once there were dragons, they're not around anymore. You know, the way that book describes. So I was thinking about that while reading this. I'm like, maybe Bailey's going to die. Maybe Marco or Celia or both are going to die. Maybe it's going to be Romeo and Juliet or West Side Story. Maybe it's going to be really effing sad, and Bailey will come to represent like a part of us or some sort of innocence lost or something. So like, I was into it, but I do agree with people saying that at the end, maybe it didn't quite come together in a really cool and, you know, clever and unique way. But again, if this were done as a live action movie, I think that Bailey would be a welcome addition to the story. And then at the end, people would go, "Oh, awesome! That's how it fits," you know. And I think that it might kind of land a little bit better. Yeah,
I like what Colleen's saying. Oh, just a comment saying, I think Bailey also kind of showed the far-reaching effect that the game had on people not directly involved with the competition. Like, it's permanently
That was what I was going to shout out too.
Yeah.
It's to show that, of course, the performers and the people who are, you know, on the outskirts of the circus who helped build it, and this sort of jarring, you know, either memory gaps or realizing people aren't aging and not having the sort of internal language to make sense of what's actually going on, but really showing that all of the people who have formed their own community following the circus, that's yet another kind of community that's grown out of this that will be impacted. I think it felt to me like the circuit, these two very removed from the world, the natural world magicians, one-upping each other, upping the stakes, figuring out ways, Hector, not you, Hector, but
he's the shit, Hector.
Bad
Prospero.
Papa Prospero, eventually ends up using his own daughter because it seems like he's like, well, she comes from me, she'll have this natural gift. But I think they do this on such a larger scale stage than it sounds like they have before, that really does pull in even more people than previous versions had. And I think, the real test for Marco and Celia too is learning how to grapple with how they were raised and what they were taught, and then the situation that they find themselves in. All of those like themes about kind of breaking molds and stuff. It's like catnip to me. Like I really enjoy. Why don't we talk about the writing a little bit more? What do you prefer? And let us know in the chat too. Did the third and second person do anything for you? Did you not really notice or care? Did you like it? How do you guys feel?
So
about it?
just to clarify, I know what first person is. I know what omniscient third person writing style is. What is second person when the writer?
Yeah. And you
Interesting.
explore and see and smell, and we guide you. Yeah, I loved it.
I thought that was, again, a nice diversion, and I never felt while reading this that it was like a slog necessarily. But I do remember feeling like when we had those sections of second person narration and the little circus experiences, that I was like, okay, how long is this? 2 pages, 3 pages? Okay, cool. Could I have used these pages for more characterization for Marco and Celia? Sure, maybe. But it's all about the tone. It's all about the atmosphere. And those little sections, I was producer brain thinking, how would I do this if I were to adapt this? I think that would be really, really interesting to try to find a way to work that in a live action adaptation somewhere. So yeah, I thought that they were cool, but and they didn't take away, and they weren't distracting, and it wasn't jarring or anything. So it was nice. More second person books, please.
I love how it's
it.
Launched you into the chapters as well, because Erin Morgenstern basically is saying you are an attendee, you are a part of the circus experience as a patron, and let us show you what this looks, feels, and sees, instead of it being through a character's eyes. I liked that it told us who we were within this experience. I thought it was such a great use. You like what I think it's Truth Gone was saying, you often don't really get a second person in any book instead of Choose Your Own Adventures. And so I think that it was a really, really clever use of it. I really appreciated it in the book. Yeah.
We should read some Choose Your Own Adventures on this show. That would be really interesting.
My long fingers were made for that.
Anytime. Oh, I used to. What kind of Choose Your Own Adventure reader are you? Do you
I never
follow
read
the
one.
rules, or do you?
never.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I told you my fingers are long, so I could hold every place where the chapter is.
I can do an octave on the piano. Yeah, I would always because in my brain I would feel guilty for cheating, so I would like look, and I also my brain would just kind of skim it and be like, oh, you know what? Never. I had this whole internal conflict with myself where I was trying to convince myself I wasn't. Yeah, cheating. I feel like
it's not cheating; it's part of the adventure.
Exactly.
You know
your
what?
own rules.
It's not choose your own rule you follow. It's choose your own adventure. That's how
choose your own adventure. I changed my mind, because if we did a book like that on this show, I would honestly read until I would get to chapter page 86. You die, and then I would put the book down and be like, "That's it. That was my adventure." And I'd come to the show and I'd be like, "Guys, I died on page 86. I don't know about you guys. I stopped. That's what happened."
I don't understand how you could do that.
That's it.
Not know
I died.
Every little thing.
I finished the book. Maybe next time I read it, maybe something different will happen.
I'll read it chronologically. I'll read it from start to finish as a book was intended.
Page.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
That doesn't
a little
make
bit
sense
like
to
this
me.
book.
Yeah, time jumpy and different and stuff. Yeah. Okay.
We've talked a little bit about Marco and Celia, but another thing I really enjoyed about this book was that I enjoyed all of the other characters. It took me a minute to, as we're getting introduced to people, to, figure out the Murray twins and who, all the different kind of moving pieces. But I really enjoyed that there were all these very distinct personalities and characters. Did either of you have any that, like, outside of Marco and Celia, that you liked, or do you totally disagree with me? That's fine too. Obviously.
It's a great question. I would love to know anybody in the chat, if you had favorite side characters, or because even though he was a jerk and he was only in the first part of the book, and yes, the character's name is Hector, but that's not why I was honestly interested in Prospero and this guy who like died to change the playing field or something, like to get out of, to be able to like be a ghost now. I was so interested in this guy, who the hell he was, how long he's been alive, what his deal is.
Disagree. Child abuser.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree with you. But
in different ways.
About him after that.
I didn't want more child abuse, certainly, Maude. Absolutely not. But I felt like, I'm like, if this guy's the villain, let me sink my teeth into this villain. And I thought that the character was going to kind of play a larger role towards the end of the, like, I thought that it was almost like a Voldemort situation where I'm like, so we're all going to rise up and defeat these two fathers, right? Like, that's what I thought.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, that's where I thought the story could have gone. So I was interested in that regard, in those father abusive characters, to be like, what the hell is your deal? And are you going to be in this? And is this book going to have a big moment in it where these two children, these two characters, sort of rebel against you, or get you to understand the pain that you caused and sort of answer to it? And and that kind of didn't happen. Although the one guy, what is it, Chandresh, like he was sort of like mind wiped and kind of like, retired. And I was like, good. I'm like, that's very nice for you, but he didn't have to answer for anything that he did, really. So it was this interesting, like, I was curious about those father characters, but as soon as the story was sort of done with them, I was like, okay.
I agree with you, because the one thing that Hector or Prospero kind of showed me was that he didn't do anything by accident. So by transferring himself into this not alive, I like what Vaden said. He died trying to stay alive forever. But it feels like there was something more crucial than what we kind of got from it with that decision.
Great comment here. Sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
No.
M. the cartographer loved Herr Thiessen. Love to see portrayals of artisans. Also love the twins. Herr Thiessen was another character who, as soon as he was killed, I was like, oh, this could be another. That was the guy who died, right? Who was accidentally killed in the duel with a knife into his heart.
But that is all of these deaths and accidents and little things. Like, it's not just one thing that's tipping the scales, and that's sort of the point. But the fact that Isabelle, at the moment that, Prospero is already trying to, mess with everyone, and no one really knew. I really appreciated this, that no one really knew that she was really helping keep a lot of that balance with her charm. But all of those things happened at the same time. So when it dropped, then there's more death after Tara. I was going to say, like, Australian versus like Southern Californian, you win every time, Maude. Sounds so much better.
Tara.
When I listen to myself speak, I never sound more Southern California. I'm like, oh shit, I really am. But anyway, so I also feel like the two magicians, like, they are it. Celia and Marco could have become this grand story of good and evil and those kinds of battles. But I do like that again, it's sort of having these characters, having authority figures who are supposed to protect you, supposed to take care of you, either physically and emotionally abuse you or completely neglect you. And so they're isolated specific. I mean, it's part of the abuser timeline, if you will, but like that isolation, they both only they can really understand what each other has gone through, and they're both longing for connection and trying to find different ways to influence the game, but also to use their magic to try to find that connection. So with Celia, hers is so internal, and she feels this need to control and to keep the weight of everyone on her shoulders by literally keeping the circus going and saying, I will sacrifice myself, but this needs to continue going. Whereas Marco has that charm and influence where he's kind of, in the shadows, behind the curtains. No one really suspects him of how powerful he is, but it's hard for him to turn that off. And him showing his real face to Celia, all of those little moments between them when they're either sharing something about their experiences or each one of their kind of core issues that they're struggling with falls away and they open up to be more vulnerable with each other. That worked for me so well. I thought it was, and all of their little magical flirtations, they were so, yeah, exactly. No, it's like, you have to learn how to be strong. You maybe feel like you can't rely on anyone, so you're the only one who can do it. I felt like exploring kind of the similarities and differences in their magic and, how they were raised and the kind of like fears that they internalized fears that they had was really interesting. One is so intellectual and one is more showy and physical. And those kind of, manifested in them in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think I also liked that we mentioned her briefly. Isabelle, I thought was a pretty interesting character because
sad, man. She was toyed along.
Yeah, but
you
I
never loved it. Was it 10 years? 10 years, and he never said it, and she just assumed.
Yeah, I was frustrated by that, but I also feel like I was thinking about that, and I was like, was that decision made so that Marco and Celia's love could sort of remain pure? Because I'm like, I honestly don't mind love stories where it starts and one person is in love with somebody else, and by the end of the, you know what I mean? Like, I think that could have also reflected the messiness of life and stuff. And so I was wondering, I'm like, I don't know if that was something that was real, but at the same time, it was very tragic and heartbreaking. And I think we could relate to somebody who just wanted to see what they believed, because we can understand that as well. Being strung along, like you said, Maude, for 10 years. Why didn't Isabelle get out? Because she wanted to see what she wanted to see. And that's relatable too. But I also liked that she wasn't a typical other romantic interest in the story who was like a bad person or evil. Like, she was very good. And I like I always feel bad for love story movies. Like, I really like James Marsden in The Notebook because he seems like a good guy. It's just
he's just not the guy for her.
He's just not the guy. So I like that angle on love stories as well, where it's as opposed to like something like The Wedding Singer, who, the opposite of Adam Sandler, like that guy's just a piece of shit. I'm like, that's fine too. But what if something, whatever his first name was, Mr. Gulia, was like a good guy, and Julia was in love with Mr. Gulia and wanted to become Julia Gulia, but then Adam Sandler comes in and, whatever. There's just different styles of love story. Guy. But he's not in that movie. But he's James Marsden in The Notebook seems seemingly good. And in this story, Isabelle, seemingly a good person. And I feel like in some ways, we almost got to know her personality even more than the personality that Celia had, because Celia was so kind of guarded, I feel like, and kind of like, so focused on her mission in a way that I think I wanted her to kind of relax and be a little bit more real and more relatable. But so, yeah, I liked Isabelle and felt bad as well. Yeah. Sad.
There's a really great conversation happening in the chat too about there are a lot of relationships like this, and there are, where people see what they want to see, consciously or not. Exactly. And I think, that bummed me out because I was like, oh, Isabelle, wake up.
Yeah. Get out of there, girl.
Girl. Get gone.
You need to get gone.
And then the fact that afterwards she was like, oh, I can see that this is something better than what I had and that your love is really beautiful. So I was like, nah.
I liked that because she did see early on in the cards a little bit more of what was going on, and we don't really see what she's seeing, but she is, I think, aware. Some part of her was aware during that time. And but I really liked that they didn't pit each other against the two female characters, and that they were able to respect you. Like, they didn't necessarily need to hug after some, terrible things happen, but they both feel for each other and understand each other in a way that I prefer seeing.
That was the real duel where she admitted defeat. And she's like, you won. What is this? Two women fighting over a man again.
Yeah.
Also, to clarify, like, Marco was in a relationship with Isabelle, but absolutely went over to Celia and like touched her face and stuff like that. Marco did that, right?
In front of everyone. It was so disrespectful.
But then he's also wiping people's memories, which is just
that doesn't make it any
thought of that. No, I'm saying it's worse. It's it made me not like him in those. I think for me, it didn't impact Isabelle. Like, I wanted her to wake up, and I was kind of hoping she wouldn't become an antagonist. I was worried that she would. But for me, it was sort of like I needed the scene with her and Marco right before she blows magic dust at him and sets him up back at the circus. But the fact that he apologized, understood, and has like that conversation, I feel like there could have been a bit more, but within the the length and like pacing of the story, I did appreciate that. And
it was also 1894, like that's also another
exactly there's a whole other level to that. But 1902 Halloween 1902, that's when I was like, okay, I understand. What about Tsukiko?
I didn't see that one coming. I did not see that twist.
I didn't either.
Yeah, neither did I. I think it was a welcome surprise, to be sure, but I wasn't like but I wasn't really looking for it. And I think that if, again, I was experiencing this story in a movie, that I maybe would have clocked it, because I feel like a lot of the book is like, look at Tsukiko, look at what she's doing over here. But now we're back to the story. And I'd be like, if I was watching this in a movie, I'd be like, Tsukiko's in on it. She knows something. She knows what's up. And an actor in that role could kind of play with that a little bit more. So that could be really cool to see. Yes, Maude.
Why aren't you a showrunner?
It's a great question.
Marvel?
Yeah.
You read a book and you've literally done your episodic breakdown with the angles and the character development, and you can pick and choose what works.
It all just there was a clue in the symbols in her tattoo, says "Si Villaseñor." I think that there's a bunch of stuff there that I just wasn't picking up on because I'm dumb and I'm into the love story part of it and everything. But I think that. Well, thank you so much. I think that we all have different brains, and I liked what this book was doing to my brain while reading it. And just to talk about a possible adaptation for a second too, I also feel like I'm just beating the same dead horse, but so much of the books that I read, I think to myself, it's almost incomplete. It's not a complete piece of art for me until I could see it come together with cinematography and acting and music and editing and special effects and all these things that come together. Even though this is its own complete piece of art, I don't want to say that it isn't. But looking at this, it's very easy to cast Tim Burton as a director to do it. But I would hope that this book could get adapted into a movie, a nice, juicy 2 hour, 20-minute movie. Really get into it, and and I think that this book should be the thing that finds the next Tim Burton in a way. Ooh. A young, hungry director that they can sink their teeth into this and really just make it visually gorgeous, and we can really see their style. I think that is what this book should lead to, as opposed to just giving this to the standard standby person who's kind of done this a million times. Oh, here's your Tim Burton. Oh, here's your Guillermo del Toro. Oh, Guillermo loved this book. He would love to make it into a movie. You know what? find a new person, because I think that would be a great.
Because Kenzie makes a great point. This needs a woman's touch.
100%. I mean, listen, I think because I'm spoiled by like prestige television, I think that everything needs everybody's touch. I think that everything needs like a writer's room to be able to, hit different people's perspectives. And, and there were times where I felt like this does have a woman's touch. Erin Morgenstern did a phenomenal job with this book, but there were times reading it where I was like, this doesn't feel like something a man would do, but you know what? Whatever, Marco's dumb. He did this, he did that. Or, these characters may feel a little bit thin to me, whatever. But I absolutely think you're right. I think that a great, just like a non-male director could make this really beautiful. And not that a male director can't, but you know what, Maude, I'm glad you brought that up, because the other day I saw somebody on Twitter say, I want to see the next X-Men film directed by an LGBTQ director. And I looked that up and I was like, hang on a minute, let me check something. Every single X-Men movie, the superhero comic book team that is supposed to be about progress and representation and diversity and inclusion and all of it's a great metaphor for that. Every single X-Men, Wolverine, Deadpool, New Mutants movie for the past 20 plus years have all been directed by straight white guys. And I was like, that's crazy. Let's get some brown directors. Let's get some gay directors. Not
Bryan Singer, but we don't.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Not Bryan Singer, but Bryan Singer went and ruined that because he's a freaking idiot and and potentially a monster. But yes, thank you, Rachel, for calling me out on that. But to that point, still white guys, every single one of them, and
for a series that literally has a character called Kitty Pryde.
That's what I'm saying. Let's get some real great diverse talent that is hungry and wants to come in and tell a great story. I'm feeling that same stuff for the Night Circus. I would love to see a visual representation of this story. So much of this book is visual.
I just have to say, Miss Necromancer, don't you put that evil on us.
Swear to God, I saw that and I was like, no.
Can I share some? Well, there's only a couple little tidbits, but one fun thing we keep talking about, Prospero.
Yep.
But there's a reference early on when he's giving Celia like other names that she goes by when she's training, and one of them is Miranda, and that's a direct reference to The Tempest, where the Prospero, the magician, Miranda is his daughter. So that I was like, ooh, that's fun.
Nice.
Also, there was another one. Oh, so there were some good foreshadowing moments too. When we first meet, what's his name? I'm losing it now. The head of, or the creator of the circus, Chandresh. We meet him throwing a knife, and then he ends up
throwing a knife.
I was like, that's fun. And there's a lot of that. And I think some of your feedback, Hector, about wanting to know more. I think so much of wanting to know more was tied up in where it was going to, of, the magic, that story of Merlin in the tree, and this idea that both of these powerful magicians are saying, magic is secrets, don't give away your secrets, don't lessen your power, but it is actually breaking down all of that kind of keeps everything going and gives them this chosen family that they're able to, they don't feel trapped because they're with all the people that they love. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, those are just a few.
I think I know that Poppet and Widget's powers was sort of discussed more over time, but that was such an interesting element to bring in, because there was a sense of innocence and getting to read a do-over in a way, because Celia and Marco had such awful upbringings that having them be a part of the circus, that nourishment and nurture that we were kind of talking about, I wish we explored a little bit more of how they learned about their powers, learned to understand their powers, and have it be a little bit more of a play in the story.
Yeah, you mean the discovery, for example, when Harry Potter makes the glass disappear at the zoo, kind of a moment when they're a kid. I was thinking about that too, Maude, and I feel because when was Night Circus written? It was obviously in a post Harry Potter. Is it
2017?
2017. So maybe
I might be wrong.
I was thinking about the exact same thing, and I was like, I wonder how this could have been done where it didn't make you think about those early Harry Potter moments, because now they become so
2011.
iconic with discovering magic. It's so iconic that I couldn't solve that problem. I don't have the answer to that, but I was feeling the same thing, Maude. I'm like, I also wanted some moment, of discovery for these young people before they enter the larger world, and because I
It's
think
such a good nugget. Like, it was such great storytelling where you're like, cool, I mean, maybe that's what I like about the fantasy side of this, where it's like, if you give me a power, I want to see this power be explored and utilized and struggled with and overcome,
Absolutely.
I think if, someone much earlier in the chat, I don't know how to find it, so I'm sorry. Let me know if you said it. But that Erin Morgenstern tells stories about stories, and I think you really feel that by the end of it. But I think, too, this being kind of the story, I think some of the, we can't know if it was deliberate or not, but because there are a lot of books that do explore that, I did like that this was more kind of about the themes and the characters within this world and what that kind of structure means to everyone in and outside of it. And also maybe because they grew up in it, for them, it's almost so natural. But I did appreciate Widget kind of telling Mr. AH, she never made us compete. She never pit us against each other. And offering Bailey that choice as well, even though it's a real quick choice to make. But
and your time
your disbelief, yeah, it's like sure.
Excuse me.
Did your watch just talk, Maude?
Yeah.
Great.
Got in on the conversation. Don't you dare.
Great comments here from Miss Necromancer. But there was no moment of discovery for Marco. He was taught. He wasn't born with magic. None of Alexander's students were. That was the whole point, really, between the differences between Alexander and Hector's schools of magic.
Yes, which is why it was so important to have it with Widget and Poppet. Because sorry, I don't know if I made that clear, but that's the big thing that I thought was missing with introducing Widget and Poppet from birth that displayed these powers, is that it's telling a different story from what we saw. And that's why I think it wasn't explored enough, and there was a great opportunity to do so.
I also think that plot point about Alexander picking a student despite them having any kind of I'm curious about that, because that opens up a bunch of questions of so does that mean that every human on the planet is capable of the magic that Marco's capable of if they're taught? It's sort of like a Doctor Strange world. Like if you study,
if they're locked up and they don't go to school or have a life and that's their only choice, maybe.
I think I would have
also is. Go ahead.
I just liked a little bit more elaboration on that, I guess. Or so, I'm that makes me curious, and that makes me, I don't know. It makes me think okay, so does that mean that Marco is not somebody who typically we think of as being a chosen one in a story, the way that Celia was? Were they fated to be in love, or was he just a random kid plucked off the street and now he's, so maybe I would have liked a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe that's what you're supposed to take away from the book, is you're supposed to think about that stuff, right? Fate versus choice and everything. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And I think too, the fact that, thinking through intellectually the magic set up Marco to be less, impacted by the spells that he was casting as well, the way that it did with Celia, where it is this kind of inherited thing. But also that she did have the talent. But Mr. AH also saying, even to Marco, I thought this would be better than whatever life you were going to have anyway, which is not it. But in his mind, I think he's thinking, well, just, pluck this orphan from somewhere, who knows what life they would have had, etc. But he also can't understand any of the connections that these characters do have, because he does not. Neither one of them cares when people die or hurt. It's just being right. It's just being right for thousands of years, which is super annoying.
And that's the only prize, right? That's it.
Really boring. Yeah.
Yeah. But unfortunately, there are a lot of powerful people like that.
I just want to say too, before we wrap up and before we announce what next month's book is going to be, January's book was an audiobook of The Sandman that had a character named Hector in it. This book had a
And
character
Maude
named Hector
and Rachel.
And Maude and
that
Rachel
one
were
had all three.
all in Sandman.
That's unheard of.
It's crazy.
I remembered that the other day and I was like, oh.
Yeah. This book, did it have a Rachel or a Maude? I think it was only a Hector in this one.
Yep.
So we got to keep the streak going. Whatever next month's book's going to be has to have at least a Hector.
Maybe
I hope. I mean, Rachel, I think you're our only hope. You have maybe the most common name. Maybe?
I have one of the most common names ever. Yeah, American, but American in the 80s and 90s. Yeah, there were. It's like Rachel, Sarah, Jessica, Jamie. Yeah, I have all of my close friends from like high school and college girlfriends. I have a friend of each name. Anyway, this was super fun, and we're going to keep discussing the book later. We'll tease that in a sec, but it is time to reveal what we're reading for next month, unless it changed in the last hour. I doubt it. So your homework is The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, which I have been wanting to read forever. I'm so excited. I let it lapse in my holds when I was on I'm still on it, a big murder book kick, and I forgot to renew it, so I'm super excited.
Ooh, that's a thick boy. That's thick.
I saved you from this.
You did.
You from the book, okay?
Yeah. But damn, boy, you thick, boy. That's a thick ass boy. That boy. Should what do we know about the audiobook? Should I do this as an audiobook or should I grab the physical copy? What does the chat say? What do we think?
You know what? I'll play you some of the audiobook in the after show.
Okay. I want to get a taste, a little
awesome.
taste of the. Okay.
I've got both though. It's a good book.
I'm so excited. Okay. So for everyone, make sure that you join us next month. We're going to be reading again The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. We will be going live on Wednesday, March 30th at 5 p.m. Pacific to discuss, and we're super excited. Don't forget, you can still send us all of your book recommendations. You can use hashtag Nerdist Book Club, or you can join the Geek Bomb Discord, which is where we host our weekly book club after show. Maude, can you break it down for us?
Sure can. The lowest tier available. So it's like you get the access, you get the after show, and you get 2 chances to join the book club that we do for Geek Bomb, which is the first and second Wednesday of each month. So there's a lot that you can get for that. Patreon.com/geekbomb. We also have a reading channel that is locked in the Discord where we do all of our chats and suggestions. And when Hector goes, what should I listen to? That all happens there. And we also did some, who was it?
You just made a home improvement sound.
Game Wizard has done casting for this book, The Night Circus. Yeah, cool. We can go over that.
Can't wait to see. Awesome. Well, we are heading there right now. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next month. If you're reading anything great, let us know so we can read it too. And we'll see everyone in a few. Have a great rest of your night.
Bye.
Or day.